Today, we're talking about a case so important, it killed 150 chickens and defined modern airspace. This can also be called as the case of terrified chickens. I'm talking about United States versus Causby, 1946. Because nothing says landmark constitutional law like poultry panic. Once upon a time, property law was easy. One gets to draw a line in the sand with a stick and call it mine. There was this old Latin chestnut, quies est solum eius est usque ad colum ad inferos. Translation: if you own the dirt, you own everything up to the heavens and down to Hades. Seriously, it's the most aggressively ambitious property rule ever written. But then, two things happened: World War II and Thomas Lee Causby's chicken farm in North Carolina. Causby's farm was right next to an airbase the US military leased. We're talking massive planes, flying super low, sometimes just 83 feet over the chicken coop, to land. The noise, the lights, the vibration, it was an ongoing aerial rave, and the chickens were not invited. The poor birds freaked out. They smashed themselves into the walls. They stopped producing. They essentially went on a spontaneous, fatal poultry strike. Causby eventually had to abandon the business. So, Causby does what any good American does: he sues. He argued that the government, by flying its metal behemoths so low and so often that his farm became unusable, had committed a taking. That's the Fifth Amendment. You can't take private property for public use without just compensation. The government basically said, "Look, buddy, we need the sky. Air travel is the future. It's a public highway." And Causby replied, "Sure, but your highway just killed my poultry empire." The case flew all the way to the Supreme Court. And in 1946, Justice William O. Douglas delivered the smackdown. First, he killed the old rule. He said the medieval concept of owning the heavens has no place in the modern world. If we let that stand, every single transatlantic flight would be an actionable trespass. And do we really own everything underneath that can be found in our land? Well, that is an entirely different story that we get to talk about next time. The air is a public highway. Congress had already made that clear in the Air Commerce Act of 1926. The minimum safe altitude is part of the public domain. But, and this is the crucial distinction, flights below that minimum safe altitude are not in the public domain. They're still in your personal, immediate airspace. The court held that when flights are so low and frequent as to be a direct and immediate interference with the enjoyment and use of the land, it is, quote, as much an appropriation of the use of the land as a more conventional entry upon it. Look, if the government parked a noisy, flashing tank 83 feet above your roof 7% of the time, would that be a taking? Yes. A low-flying military plane is effectively the same thing. The government had acquired a navigational easement. The government essentially has to rent the right to scare your birds. So the chickens won. The Causbys won. Justice for sleepless homeowners. The Supreme Court still reversed the judgment and sent the case back down to the Court of Claims. Why? Because the lower court failed to include a precise, specific description of the nature or duration of the easement taken. Was this right to fly low for the term of the lease? Was it permanent? If the government is going to acquire an interest, even air, the interest needs to be defined. So, US versus Causby is the case that established a clear boundary in property law. You don't own the clouds, but you do own the immediate reaches above your land. It gave us the legal mechanism to hold the government accountable when the necessary public function, like aviation, interferes directly and substantially with your private use. So there it is. He didn't get to own the cosmos, but he did get paid for the government using the air right above his barn as a noise corridor. It set the precedent. Property rights don't reach the moon, but they do reach high enough to keep your chickens from having a midlife crisis.